When I was a kid and thought about cult movies, I either pictured the Rocky Horror Picture Show, Plan 9 from Outer Space, or Fritz the Cat. There were tons more, but none I could get my hands on easier than those three. Have you ever tried to find a copy of Jodorowsky's Holy Mountain in 1988? I'm not saying it was impossible, but it was way easier to find VHS copies of people's weddings than any of the really weird stuff. Cult films, or cult classics as they're more usually called, were specifically grouped together to appeal to only a very limited group of people. But that group was extremely passionate about it. These were movies that usually were ignored upon release, losing millions for the producers. They were eventually discovered either on home video or when finally shown on cable by a rabid group of fans that would arrange screenings, set up conventions, or do just about anything to keep their love of their favorite piece of media alive. A lot of these cult movies in the 1970s and 1980s were focused on being transgressive or breaking taboos that modern society held dearly. The controversial nature of some of these films, along with ritualized participation, cosplay, and lifelong obsession, have streamlined and basically defined the modern interpretation of fandom and geek culture. What was once something just for obsessive fans pulls in billions of dollars across the globe, at film festivals, comic conventions, and anywhere that film nerds unite. Since the turn of the century, as the dissemination of media has become faster and more plentiful, cult classics don't even necessarily have to be films that flopped anymore. Some have even become massive mainstream hits just based on the passion of their fan bases. The Big Lebowski was released in 1998 to mixed reviews, with The Guardian going so far as to call it a bunch of ideas shoveled into a bag and allowed to spill out at random. It grossed $5.5 million on its opening weekend, with its final worldwide gross being somewhere around $46.7 million. Not exactly a blockbuster, but not really a flop either. Yet almost everyone I've met has seen the movie, and most of them can quote at least one or two lines from it. Here's where this series of lectures kicks in. I'm Jared Rasic, and I am bored with our current cult classics, and I'm ready for some new ones. I have a list of about 100 films, post-2000, that I would consider to be modern cult classics, or as the film critic Scott Tobias from over at the AV Club calls them, the new cult canon. Some are movies that tons of people have heard about, and some are movies that no one I know has ever even heard of. Some are going to be very specific to my own sensibilities, and some are going to reach out and touch you where you live. I want a new list of cult classics that will reach out and connect with as many people as possible. I've always felt that the importance of film was empathy. Not just the empathy that film engenders in us for people that we're unfamiliar with, but empathy for ourselves. For people who don't feel seen, who feel completely alone and unmoored out in the world until they find that one piece of pop culture that makes them feel understood. As corny as it might sound to someone who's never felt it before, finding a movie or a song or a book that speaks to you in the moment that you need it the most is like finding a home that you never knew existed before. A place to feel safe. Donnie Darko did that for me. The film never opened in theaters because anything airplane related got shelved in late 2001, so I didn't see it until its video release in March of 2002 when I was working at a long-gone Hollywood video. I was 21, had just been dumped by my first college girlfriend, and felt adrift in the snowy recesses of Central Oregon. But then that cover showed up on the shelves. A creepy rabbit made out of the faces of Jake Gyllenhaal, Jenna Malone, Noah Wyle, Drew Barrymore, and Patrick Swayze. I figured it would just be another direct-to-DVD horror movie that Hollywood Video was filled with in those days. I would be wrong. On its surface, Donnie Darko is just about a high school kid named Donnie. He sleepwalks and has visions of a man in a bunny suit named Frank who tells him the world is going to end on Halloween. Throughout the film, he meets his first love, stands up to some bullies, and basically leads a normal high school life. But everything is leading up to Halloween night, towards the end of everything. Oh, and there's time travel. And Patrick Swayze has a sex dungeon in his basement. Spoilers. I probably watched Donnie Darko 50 times while I worked at that video store. It was my definition of what a perfect movie is. Rewatching it now, almost 20 years later, I see that it's not perfect. It's kind of messy. There's some sloppy writing and the ending is a tad anticlimactic. But 40-year-old me doesn't need it to be perfect. 21-year-old me did. And it was. If that's not the definition of a cult classic, then fire me now. Writer-director Richard Kelly was only 25 when filming for the movie began, so the random early 20s philosophy student musings were still fresh in his mind. He had deep thoughts, and he wanted to get them out. Sometimes those deep thoughts just boil down to, like, what does it all mean? And that's a beautiful thing. To this day, I still talk to people in their 20s who are discovering the film for the first time. For most of them, it completely changes their brain by the end. Not just the things they're thinking about, but the types of film and art they're into. I could spend hours talking about the thematic depths of Donnie Darko, about the discussions that it raises about medicating your teenagers, about schizophrenia, about ageism, racism, sexism. I have spent hours talking the ears off of customers of that ill-fated video store about Donnie Darko, some of whom thanked me profusely for showing them the movie and telling me that it changed their life, others of whom demanded a refund because of my horrible recommendation. Both reactions make me equally happy. So, I submit to you, people of Bend Film, patrons of Tin Pan Theater, the folks of YouTube, and everyone in between, Donnie Darko is my first selection for the new modern cult cinema. Tune in next week when I talk about one you might not be so familiar with, Lynn Ramsey's 2002 masterpiece, Morvern Caller. We'll talk to you then.